So thank you again, Milo, for introducing me, and for to K15T and Scandio for having me for this event. So my name is Dave Meyer. I'm a group product manager at Atlassian. I'm going to give this presentation in English. I will do my best to go slowly. This is the one piece of German that I got into the presentation, but please feel free to ask questions, and I will, or ask me to repeat something, and I will do my best to answer it. So I work on the Enterprise Cloud group within Atlassian. So I'm specifically focused on the Atlassian Access offering, the premium editions, and the new enterprise plan for Atlassian's cloud products. But prior to that, I worked on the Jira team for years, and then on the Atlassian Marketplace before that. So hopefully I have a good all-around knowledge of Atlassian. But I wanted to talk today about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I think fundamental to helping teams scale and unleash the power of teamwork within their products. That's Atlassian's mission, is to unleash the potential of every team. And we know that a lot of teams work at larger and larger companies. So if we can't unleash the potential of an administrator and of an organization to set up our products in a way that scales to the size of that organization, then it can be very difficult to for the teams inside that organization to be successful. So, and the reason why I wanted to focus specifically on cloud is not just because I work personally on cloud, but because that's the destination for 90% of the new customers that are coming to Atlassian today. And we know that for many, many more of our customers out there, the next couple years, potentially accelerated by the coronavirus, are going to be looking at our cloud offerings more and more. So, but to that point, I hope that some of the things that I share today can go across both server, data center, and cloud. I'm going to talk about general concepts. The goal of my presentation is not to convince you why you should migrate to cloud, but more about what is possible with the cloud offerings. There's no reason for the picture of the dog on that slide. I just wanted to get a picture of my dog in this presentation somewhere. So three main topics: how governance with Atlassian products can set teams up to scale the usage of the products within their companies. I'm going to compare how governance looks on premises and in the cloud products, and then go a little bit deeper into the user management functionality that we have available in the cloud offerings. So starting with how governance enables scale. When we think about scale, one of the ways we think about scale is frequently we see that the number of users that are using a company, using the Atlassian tools within an organization, grows a lot faster than the number of administrators that are within an organization. So one way to look at scale is, how can we allow an administrator to support more users with the same number of their hours of time? When we look at the distribution of administrators, we see that we see that within the middle sizes of our customers, approximately a third of users have administrative privileges. But when we look at the number of users for each administrator by company size, we see that as you get into larger and larger customer sizes, for our customers that we consider enterprise with more than 1,000 Atlassian seats, there are 39 users per each administrator, while in smaller companies, there are only 3 every fourth user is an administrator. So administrators have to get a lot more efficient in order to support larger and larger numbers of users, and that's why administration and governance are so important. When we ask administrators, what are the tasks that they do every day? the number one task, 95 administrators told us that they spent, at least at one point in the last month, they spent time managing users and permissions, and 85% spent time giving users and removing users access to the products. Everything else kind of paled in comparison to those two primary tasks. So we know that user management is critical to what administrators are spending their time doing. And whether you're in server or data center or the cloud editions of the products, you're going to be doing those same kinds of tasks. That doesn't go away. So if you're working, if you're used to a on-premises environment, then I think the Atlassian Cloud offerings are pretty substantially different, and it can be intimidating. So I want to talk through that. There are two primary differences, I think, when it comes to governance. And the first one is infrastructure. So when I talk about infrastructure, I mean, who has visibility and whose responsibility for the actual operation of the application. So when you're running the product, that means that you're in charge of performance. And so we see administrators of our server and data center products spend a lot more time optimizing and analyzing and maintaining performance. And then the next most common activity is performing upgrades. So we know that for our largest customers, planning and executing an upgrade can take months or years. And you own security. So you're responsible for conducting security audits, making sure that the products are compliant with your practices. You have to manage software, or you're hosting in a public cloud provider. And if you want to integrate the system with another tool within your company, you're doing it yourself. When we're running it, we're responsible for all of those things. We maintain the hardware. We are assuring good performance. We are deploying new changes every day. We're doing our own security analysis and audits. And that gives administrators more time for making sure that the business gets the most value out of the software. I don't think that that's even something that's specific to Atlassian. That's why companies in every industry are moving to SaaS software. So when it comes to the number one task that we know administrators perform, user management, we had to really think about how we wanted to set up our SaaS offerings in a way that allowed administrators to do that job of getting more out of the products for their organization better. So if you live in the server data center world, you might start with a really simple user management setup like this. This is what our products ship with by default. So Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket, Bamboo, each product has a internal directory of users. Once you get to a certain size, most enterprise companies point those directories instead to a Active Directory or LDAP. Maybe if you're more sophisticated and you want single sign-on across all of those server data center products, then you connect that LDAP to a crowd directory. Or maybe you have something more complex altogether where you have multiple directories that each product is pointing to, plus crowd having an external LDAP directory. It can get very complicated very quickly. In cloud, we're starting from a somewhat different place. First of all, we have a different set of products, but more than that, we can have, as it's much more common for customers to have not just multiple products, so Jira Software and Confluence and Jira Service Desk and Trello, but also multiple instances of that product. It's so much easier to go to Atlassian.com and sign up for a new Jira Software instance that's part of the value, that it can become, very quickly, what you see is that within a given organization, there might be many more active Jiras or Confluences than you might expect. And what that means is that for users, if I had to have a different login for every single one of those Jira and Confluence instances, if I had to, when I switched from Jira Software to Bitbucket, if I had to log in again, that would get really frustrating. And that's why we created the concept of a single Atlassian account. So each user in Atlassian's cloud has a single Atlassian account that's tied to your email address. So mine is dmeyer@atlassian.com. And once I'm logged in to that account, I can go from any cloud product that I have access to without logging in again. I can go from Jira Software to Atlassian's primary Confluence to a second Confluence that my team maintains, to Trello, to Bitbucket, without having to log in over and over and over again, or remember multiple passwords, or probably forget my password and then lose my password or have my password compromised. And so what that means is that we have within an organization or within a company, lots of users that each have their own individual account that can have access to many things. And what that means for a company is that a user's identity in the cloud is no longer tied to any one individual product. So just because I have access to just because I have access to Milo's Jira doesn't mean Milo owns my account. He can't reset my password for me. And so that's really great for a user, but it presents a problem for organizations or companies that want to set up governance and control. And so that's why we introduced in the cloud the concept of an organization. And an organization is supposed to be a parent entity that brings together what a company really looks like when using our software. So it brings together the people that use the software and the products that that organization sponsors. So you have users with accounts and identities, and then you have our products, Jira, Confluence, Opsgenie, Bitbucket, Trello. And some of the people in that organization are almost certainly using the products that the company maintains, but maybe those people are also working with a client or a contractor or on their Jira or their Confluence. And so, or you have external third parties that have access to the company's Jira software and Confluence that aren't part of the organization. And so what this allows us to do is bring together the two different concepts into one place for an administrator. So when we think about how we can use an organization to set up governance better in the cloud, it's three things. The first one is bring all company accounts into one place and put controls on them, like single sign-on. And the second one is get visibility, so you can put security on all the accounts and visibility into all the products. So you can see for any user and aggregated together all of the products that are in use within your company. And then finally, what we're working on next is the ability to manage product access at a global level across many instances for an organization. And that's how we believe we can make administrators more efficient when administering more users in the cloud. So with that, I'm going to jump into a deep dive on user management, and then I'm going to hopefully have plenty of time left over for questions. So when we think about governance in cloud, it really starts with that first step of defining your organization. So you use an organization to collect all of the products and accounts within your company. And once you've done that, you get a view that looks like this, where you can see, all right, I've got a Jira software and a Confluence that are part of my organization, and I've secured all my accounts with access. All right, my organization is growing, and actually I have many Jiras and several Confluences and some Jira Service Desk products in there as well that are being used by different parts of my same company. The next step is, all right, so I've got the products in my organization. How do I make sure that I'm collecting all of the users in my organization? So we know that the best way, the most secure and most guaranteed way to make sure that you have visibility into all of the people within your organization is via the domain of their email address. So if you work for Atlassian, you have an Atlassian.com email address. If you don't work for Atlassian, you probably don't have an Atlassian.com email address. And what we want to make sure that we can guarantee to an administrator is that if I'm the administrator of Atlassian, I want to make sure that any Atlassian employee is going to be visible to me. I don't want to have pockets of users that I don't know about within the company. And so that's why we've gone for a domain-based approach. So once you verify ownership of your domain, you claim all of the accounts that have any Atlassian account that we know about that has a email address that's on that domain. So if you're the administrator of acme.com, in this case, you claim acme.com, and then you can see every single user that Atlassian knows about that has an acme.com email address on their accounts. And that's really where we see administrators taking the first step to good cloud governance. So the administrators, once they've claimed the domain, they can see all of those accounts, and then they can start auditing. So they can see, okay, I actually have many more Atlassian Cloud users than I thought I did. And for each one of those users, you can see which products they have access to, regardless of whether your company is the sponsor of that product or not. So you can see if Andrew here had gone and created his own Jira software instance to work with his friends on a secret side project, you'd be able to see that as well. You also get visibility into Trello and Bitbucket, and whether the user has created API tokens. You have full control over that account. And when we aggregate this up, we can build really cool features that combine both the users that we know about and the products that we know about to show you things like the number of active users within your organization. So when we think about applying a security angle here, I think it's helpful to take a step back and think about cloud security and cloud software in general. So this is kind of the old way of doing security, and frequently it's the way that we do security for on-premises software. So you basically put the software on your company's network, and you say, all right, if you're inside of the network, if you're on the company network, you're trusted, and you can just log in with a username and password. Otherwise, you are untrusted and you can't access anything. And as I'm sure many companies have found, in a time like when everybody's working from home, this becomes really difficult to maintain. And as users use more devices from more locations, it becomes more and more complex to have a network perimeter-based security. And so instead, what most companies have moved to is the idea that people themselves should be the perimeter, and that you can do contextual identity-based security. And the way that that's most commonly implemented is with SAML single sign-on. And so these are the SAML sign-on providers that Atlassian supports. We effectively support any provider that has that supports SAML, but these are the most common ones. And so let me, hopefully everybody knows what single sign-on looks like, but just to dive into it a little bit more, when I type in my email address here, if single sign-on is configured on my account, you see that it automatically redirects based on the fact that I have based on the domain of my email to the single sign-on provider that's been configured here. In this case, it's Okta. So, and that's where, as I'm sure everybody has done, whether it's Okta or Microsoft or Google or another Facebook or something else, you've signed in there. And when you're signing in there, that's when the really cool stuff is happening in Okta. So because Atlassian is trusting Okta and Okta's identity to be the security provider, in Okta, you can set up a conditional access policy. So you can only be logging into Atlassian on certain devices or from certain locations. You can say, all right, we don't want to allow, there's certain countries where you shouldn't be able to access our company's products from. You can make sure that if somebody is logging in, that you know about it and can control which users are allowed to use Atlassian services. And that's all of that kind of comes for free just because once you start saying Atlassian just trust Okta or trust my identity system to enforce the security that I can configure. And that helps admins scale, because once they've done it once once they've set it up in their identity system, they can point all of their software, whether it's Atlassian software or Dropbox or Salesforce or any kind of SaaS product, all to the same identity system. And for the user, once they're logged into Okta, they just see Jira software as they normally would. If single sign-on isn't an option, we provide several other security strategies for administrators. One is two-step verification, so you can require that every user have two-step verification enabled on their account. You can set up a strong password policy, and you can set session durations that require users to re-log in on a regular basis. The other key identity capability that helps enforce governance is user provisioning. And so what user provisioning does is it sets up a syncing between the identity provider like Azure or Okta and the Atlassian products. And so we sync three things. We sync the active status of a user. So if there is a new user, we create a new account. If that user is removed from the identity system because they've left the company, we deactivate the account. We sync their details. So if you change the name, if you update their email address, if you update their department or the location, we sync that information. And then finally, we sync groups and group memberships. So if you have your own groups defined in the identity system, just like you might in Active Directory or LDAP on server, then we can sync those groups and those group memberships so that you can use them for permissions and that sort of thing in the cloud products. And so there are three big benefits. The first one is onboarding. So you can centralize onboarding and offboarding and make it a lot more auditable and trackable and faster. So when a user joins the company, they're added to the right groups in the directory, and it automatically provisions the accounts for the users in the system so that they don't have to negotiate that separately. The second one is cost management. One thing that we hear from admins over and over again is it's hard to keep track of all the people coming and going from my company, and that creates problems for me because people have left and I don't know, and I'm still paying for their Jira or Confluence account, which is first insecure, and two, because you don't want them to be able to still access your company's data, and two, a waste of money because you're paying for people that aren't using the software. So if you have the identity system in sync with Atlassian, then it makes sure that you're not billed because users will be automatically deactivated. And finally, we know that companies rely on groups heavily, and so having groups available for setting up permissions can help make sure that permissions are a lot more scalable in the products. So if I can leave you with a few steps that you can take today to set up better governance in the cloud. We talked about the importance and value of creating an organization and then claiming your domain in order to bring in all of your users into that organization, auditing those users, making sure that if there's lots of people that have left the company, that you deactivate those accounts. You can see, review which products that those users are using. And then and you can see for those products, which ones they're administering. You can create a security checklist, a list of steps that you can take in order to make sure that each user is secure. Highly recommend setting up SAML single sign-on and user provisioning and deprovisioning. And then finally, something I didn't talk about in detail today, but as key to good governance is making sure that you have clear visibility across all of those instances on which apps are installed, which users have created API tokens, what the security and support policies for the apps that are available to your admins and what they've installed for those vendors is to make sure that you're setting up a scalable and secure governance for your cloud products. So with that, I'm gonna move over and take some Q&A. Thank you all so much for having me, and hopefully it was valuable to you.